St. Louis de Blancford, Quebec. Blink and you might miss it. A one road town buried in the winding woods, hugged tight by groves of sugar maples whispering in the wind. As you slowly drive along to the end of this dirt path, you'll see a shabby looking warehouse. You could tell it used to be painted white once upon a time. The doors open and inside you see barrels and barrels of Quebec's finest maple syrup. And this was no mom and pop shop, it was a large scale warehouse with just rows and rows of white barrels stacked 20 feet high. It's quite impressive to look at. And someone knew about these barrels and they were tired of playing by the rules. So it was time to break the game and commit one of Canada's largest heists. Welcome to Don't Tell Teddy podcast. I'm your host, Melissa, and this is the story of the Great Canadian Maple Heist. If you're interested in true crime or historical events, this is the place for you. So stick with me and I'll tell you the most Canadian heist to ever exist. On August 12th, 2012, Inspector Michel Gavreau was doing a routine inventory check when he noticed something wasn't quite right. He was climbing on top of a barrel to continue inventory when the barrel suddenly started to shake under his feet. He looked down at the white barrel and was confused. It looked the same as the others, even had the official tag, but it shouldn't have buckled under his weight. These barrels are about 600 pounds, so why is this moving? He opened the barrel to check what is going on, and instead of finding that glorious syrup inside, he found water. And this started a massive police operation with joint police forces across multiple provinces. When Julien Beauchamp La Liberté received the call about the theft, he sat for a moment pondering and said, "What?" When he got the phone call saying that syrup was stolen and they need the police, he laughed and said, "This is similar to calling the police to report that milk was stolen from your fridge." Like, what do you mean I need to come investigate stolen syrup? So he had commented that the crime scene was also very unusual, right? Like, it's not like syrup has GPS tracking, right? They don't have cell phones. And worst of all, you can eat the product. He's so funny. So over 250 investigators were called in from multiple different agencies. And the first step, of course, was to identify the total number of barrels that were stolen. And I will say they were pretty smart and quick to notice some variations on the barrels. They noticed that certain barrels had rings of rust around them, which was odd. So maple syrup doesn't sweat. It just sits at a room temperature and nothing happens. But water does sweat. So with the water being in these barrels, it was creating a rust ring, right? So easy peasy, we'll find these barrels in no time. Well, by the end of the investigation, over 9,561 barrels were discovered as stolen, worth more than $18 million, which is 30 million in today's dollars. And each barrel is worth approximately $1,300. Bet you're thinking, holy crap, Canada, maple syrup? That's what I said. So how did this happen? Well, let's go back a bit. This all started with an alleged syrup cartel operating out of Quebec. Now, I say alleged because I don't want to be sued or anything, but I'm going to put the definition of a cartel below, and you tell me if this sounds exactly the same. So in 1958, a group of syrup producers came together with a joint marketing plan to boost their industry. So great, sounds like a great idea. This group later became the Federation of Maple Syrup Producers of Quebec, also known as FPAC. That's the English name of it. I'll also post the French name below because there's no way I'll pronounce that correctly and someone will be mad at me. Through a series of steps, everything changed in 2003, and this is when the group became a cartel. The Federation demanded that all syrup produced in Quebec must be sold to the Federation. This group has sole control over setting syrup prices and production quotas within Quebec. So let me explain. Every single syrup producer in Quebec has to basically sign up with the Federation or follow their rules, I should say. You don't sign up, just follow their rules. And otherwise, they will impose fines and what has been described as alleged harassment from members who refuse to cooperate in the cartel. In the year 2000, the International Strategic Reserve was founded. The main goal or theory behind this reserve is to allegedly help prevent any shortages if there is a bad crop season. So once you receive your quota, if you have produced more than that quota, The rest has to be stored in this inventory so that if there's a following year with bad crops, they can take it out of this inventory. This will help keep prices stable across the industry, which I understand, right? Wanting to have some in preserve. So reason being, on average, Quebec produces approximately 77% of the world's maple syrup supply. That's pretty crazy, right? That's just one province in Canada. That's not like an entire country. And they're supplying 77% of the world's maple supply. Wild. That was the theory of why this whole federation started, why the reserve started. But obviously, cartels like to get out of control. So they began strictly controlling quotas, which drew many protests from the smaller producers. Some of them, I'm going to call them rebels. Some of these producers refused to join the federation or abide by their rules. And one of their main reasons is that this federation only exists in Quebec. The rest of Canada does not have to follow these rules. So if I produce maple syrup in Ontario, where I'm from, I don't have to put anything in reserve. I could produce as much as I want. Obviously, the conditions in the rest of Canada are not as good as Quebec is, so makes sense why they're trying to control things. You then had these, what we call the rebels. So the rebels that were refusing to join, protesting, they're like, nope, we're not joining, get out of here. So in retaliation, the Federation hired an increasing number of what they call inspectors who would go out to all of these maple syrup producing factories or farms, whatever you want to call them. They would check on quotas, what people are producing, and to make sure that they're abiding by the Federation's rules, which is crazy because they would literally go in and steal people's products. These small little maple syrup producers, they own the land that they are producing the maple syrup on. So they have all the trees where they have their sugar taps, and that's their land. So for the Federation to go out and send these inspectors to say, no, you produce too much syrup from your own land, I'm taking it, that's wild to me. That's like me having an apple tree in my backyard, and then the government comes and says to me, no, you've had too many apples, give me some. Like, what? All right, so what does all this have to do with the heist? As mentioned, not everybody was on board with this forced federation. So enter Richard Valliere, a high-profile black market syrup broker. But you didn't think you would ever hear these words. A black market syrup broker. So back in the day, Richard, he was known as being one of the official maple syrup, I guess, smugglers. They call them barrel rollers, but that's just an old term. He was known for breaking the rules and stealing some syrup. I think he had already done a year in prison before on this. He had like fines of $500,000 from the Federation that he was refusing to pay. It was just crazy. So anyways, let's just say I totally support him and his black market maple syrup, but he's also not exactly the best. He's a little bit shady, okay? But he doesn't run in cartels either. So, I mean, who's really the bad guy here? So as the Federation kept regulating all this syrup, they suddenly found themselves in desperate need of a larger facility. The Federation contacted a man named Avik Caron, and they rented a remote warehouse on that lonely road in St. Louis de Blanford. In a chance meeting, Avik Caron met Richard and casually mentioned that he's storing all this maple syrup. And suddenly, Richard's eyes lit up. Avik had no idea the value of all this syrup. And once Richard saw the numerous barrels inside this warehouse, a plan was hatched. And it was quite savvy too. So they recruited a trucker who already worked inside the warehouse and was employed by the Federation. So the plan was he would go and pick up these barrels that were full of syrup. They had a small sugar shack down the road. So he would drive these full barrels down the road. They would then switch. So they take off the full barrels and they put on the white barrels that now contained water. So when the barrels get returned, it looks like nothing ever left, right? And the level of detail that they put in this heist was so spectacular. They purchased the exact same white barrels and printed the exact same Federation labels for the replacement barrels. It was a pretty legit operation that they had going on here. They were moving a lot of product in and out in a day and nobody noticed because this was just a warehouse, right? The Federation wasn't there. Pretty easy to just go in and steal the maple syrup. The money was pouring in along with the syrup. And I think Richard got in over his head at this point, and that's when the operation became sloppy. Numerous barrels were moving in and out, and they stopped taking the time to fill the barrels with water and began leaving them empty. So that's how the inspector noticed a missing $18 million worth of syrup, all because his feet started to shake under a barrel. Theft lasted from July 2011 to August 2012, which isn't very long, and it netted $18 million and they moved over 9,500 products. That's wild. Police investigated and they later recovered hundreds of barrels in another province, New Brunswick, and it was in a warehouse owned by Etienne St. Pierre. I saw footage of them raiding his house, and when I say they raided, they took everything. Like, this would be like, you know how the Grinch stole Christmas and like he stole every last piece, even the roast beef? That's what the RCMP did to this man, okay? Finally, by the end of 2012, 17 individuals had been arrested. Richard Valliere was sentenced to 8 years in prison and repayment of $9.4 million. Avik Caron was sentenced to 5 years in prison and a $1.2 million fine. Richard's father was also fined and imprisoned, but he wasn't really part of the story, so I just left him out. Etienne St. Pierre was sentenced to 2 years in jail and an $850,000 fine. When I heard that Etienne St. Pierre went to jail, I was mad. Etienne St. Pierre lives in New Brunswick. The Federation does not exist in New Brunswick. So Etienne is a broker, okay? Etienne will buy off of someone like Richard. So he's the one selling the syrup. Etienne is the broker and he's selling it to Europe, Asia, all over the world, okay? If Etienne is living in New Brunswick where the Federation does not have any jurisdiction over him, why is he in trouble? I get that maybe the government is trying to say that he was profiting off of stolen funds, but his argument or defense is, how did I know where he was getting the syrup from? I don't know. I don't know. And so, I have a little trouble with Etienne getting sentenced to 2 years. I mean, it is Canada, so he probably didn't even serve the full time, but still. So why does Canada allow Quebec to run this legal cartel? It probably has to do with the fact that the gross value of maple syrup sales hit a record high of $837.3 million, a 49% increase from 2020. And so this study was from last year, so that's only like a 4-year gap of a 49% increase. So let me know in the comments what you think of this crazy Canadian story. Tell me as well if you guys think that Etienne should be in jail. Thanks for watching, guys, and thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.